Hello fellow game developers, I hope you're doing good, and today we're going to learn how to create this increasing score effect in Unity. We have seen this in multiple games. When the player lose the match, the score counter start to increase by a certain speed. So let's jump right into it. Okay, so we already have a visual scene set up here. So first of all, we're going to create couple of text fields in our scene so that we can display all of the text and to display the scores. We're going to create text by right clicking in the hierarchy window and select text under the UI option. Right now, as you can see, the text is not visible in our scene. That is because it is out of our camera view. In order to fix that, we can simply focus on the object by hitting F on keyboard and make sure the text is selected, and we can pull it up in our game scene just like that. I'm going to rename this just to ignore any sort of confusion, as it is important to name everything when you're creating something. So let's call it scores underscore text, as it is going to store the text of scores. Before proceeding, I'm going to change some properties of our text object. First, we need to change its color to white. Next up, we will write what we want to display in the text field. So I'm going to type in scores, and here I have original font from Super Mario Bros. The link for the font is in the description. So I'm going to just drag and drop it in the font field, and to make it fit best in the available area, I'm going to turn best fit option on. With this option turned on, the text is going to fit the best according to the size rectangular box it is stored in, and I'm going to resize it a little. I'm going to duplicate this text object. In order to duplicate, we can either hit Ctrl plus D on keyboard, or we can simply right click on the game object and select duplicate, and I'm going to put it below, just below the scores, and rename it to end scores underscore text, and same with the text property of the object. Right now, as you can see, that it is wrapping around the area available because the best fit option is turned on. We can simply fix it by increasing the width of the box just like that. After that, I created 4 more text fields in the scene, 2 fields to display the scores and 2 fields for the display of instructions. Now I'm going to come in the scripts folder and right click on it and create a new C# script in which we are going to do all of our code. I'm going to call it game manager and hit enter. Now let's begin with the code part. But wait, before we even write the first line of code, it is very important, like very important, that we conclude in script that we're going to use Unity's UI class. Otherwise we will not be able to get any reference from the UI components. So in order to do that, we have to simply write here that we are using Unity engine.ui class, and with that, now we have access to all the objects which come under UI system. Now moving on to the code part, first of all I'm going to get rid of this section, and we're going to first define all the variables which we require to make the system work. First of all, I'm going to define variables which will display the score text, and this will be of type text. And if you don't mention in script that you need to use UI class, then you will straight up get an error. So make sure you don't create that mistake and mention in the beginning of script that you need Unity Engine's UI class. So the first two variables are going to be responsible for showing the scores value in the text fields that we created. Now we're going to create variable of type int which will calculate the scores, and another variable in which we will show the increasing score effect, and we will define by how much number we want to increase the scores using another variable of type int, and one more variable with which we can decide by how many number the end scores are going to be increased by. And we will need to check whether the game is over or not, so for that we are going to use a boolean, and I'm going to call it game over. Now we're going to write our code inside update function. First of all, we need to decide when to increase scores. So for that, I'm going to write if input dot get key down is space key, then we need to run the code inside the brackets, and we're going to say that scores will be equal to existing value of scores plus score value. Now we have to trigger the game over boolean so we can start the counting scores effect. So I'm going to use escape key to turn game over boolean true, and we are going to write another if statement that if game over is true, then call the game over function. The reason why we're creating a separate game over function is because we want to keep it running every single frame until the score does not reach the desired number. So if we're going to write it here only, then it is only going to call the function for one frame, and that will not keep the scores running. So I have written a new public function called game over, and I'm going to create an if statement inside it that if end score is not equal to scores, and if scores is greater than end scores, then increase the end scores with growth rate value until it is not equal to scores value. Now to display it in our text field, we are going to take text component of variable that we defined above and set it equal to scores. And since the scores variable is an integer type, we need to convert it into a string type because text does not really like integers, so we have to convert it. And to do that, I'm just going to write dot to string, and in the brackets I'm going to write 0 just to keep it in a non-decimal format, but it is not necessary as our score variable is already an integer type, so its value will never be in a decimal format. So even if you miss that 0 part, the code will work absolutely fine. And we're going to do the same with the end scores variable and set it equal to end scores integer type, and also convert it to a string type. With our code set in place, it's time to test our scene, but first we will need some object to attach our script to. So I'm going to create a new empty game object, and I'm going to call it game manager, and attach the script that we just created to the game object. And once we have it here, you can see that we have various unassigned fields available here, so we need to fill them up with the right type of object. So I'm going to plug score value object in score val variable, and I will do the same with the others. Scores and end scores are going to be calculated when we run the game, so we're going to leave them 0, and score value is the number by which we want to increase the scores by, and growth rate is the number by which we want to increase the end scores value by. So let's test our scene, and whenever we hit space key, the scores will increase by 100. Sweet, so everything seems to be working fine here. So now let's see if the end scores work when we hit the escape key, and voila, it's working. I'm going to quickly go ahead and fix the scaling issue that we have here. Now the basic code is working absolutely fine, but we still have a little problem here, and that is we can still increase the scores when the end scores are being increased, so we don't want that. In order to fix it, we just have to add another condition to our script. So we will go to the section where we are increasing the scores and add another condition that only to increase scores when game over boolean is false, and that will fix the issue. Now let's test our scene again, and it should be working absolutely fine. And we can no longer increase the scores when the end scores are being increased, and that is exactly what we want. Thank you for watching, guys, and before you go, I would like to invite you to the Discord server, and you can also connect with me on your favorite social platforms. The links are in the description below, and I see you next time.